Welcome to Peak Performance Perspective with me, Mark Talukdar, and our guest today is Mr. Henry Woodman. As a teenager, he went on an Indiana Jones type of an adventure in search of a lost city in the jungles of Honduras. He later pursued his passion for film production and travel. He moved to Chile and produced a game show, Machos. His work in television and film production earned him 4 local Emmy nominations. And as if that wasn't enough, he then founded a virtual tour company that evolved into a global platform tech that helps hotels manage and deliver visuals to thousands of online travel websites. In June of 2024, he published a book that now he's turning into a TV series. So what did we talk about in this episode? We talked about what it means to have mental discipline and how to develop that, how to deal with stress and anxiety when pursuing major life goals, when there's a lot on the line, how to deal with imposter syndrome while achieving balance in between our professional and personal lives. Henry, how are you doing?
If I get any better, Mark, I'd be a walking Mardi Gras. Yeah, as long as you don't throw those beads, I keep my shirt on and nobody gets hurt.
Hey, oh my gosh, have you ever been to Mardi Gras?
No, I was in Carnival in Rio when I was in my early 20s after college, and there are things there I can't even mention on a podcast.
You have obviously accomplished a lot, and I want to talk about a lot of things, but the most interesting thing that I want to start out with is that when you were 16 years old, your dad took you, your brother, your friends, and said, we are going to Honduras on an adventure to find a lost city. Tell me about this.
When Dad presented it, it sounded so romantic. You're going to go in like a Indiana Jones thing. You're going to go on this grand adventure. You're going to go to Honduras and you're going to look for the lost white city, the Ciudad Blanca. And it's there. We know where it is. And we have a guy that's going to help guide you there. And we were like, yeah, baby, bring it on. Sounds exciting. Oh, we're good for an adventure. We're 16-year-old. We're fairly in good shape. And we're excited about getting out for the summer. And reality set in the minute we took this bush pilot, the pilot's name was Captain Crash. That should tell you something right there. And we go into this area where they had to fly over the grass area to get rid of the animals so that we could land. And essentially, we spent 2 months in the jungle looking for what was called Ciudad Blanca, or the White City. We found what's called metates and some ruins and things, but the reality is we didn't officially find the White City. And decades later, a guy named Steve reached out and he said, I'm exploring, I'm trying to find out, where did you guys go? Tell me a little bit about the things, because we have this new equipment called LiDAR, can look underneath the canopy. Because listen, after hundreds of years being buried in the jungles, it's all canopy. You can't see. You can walk on top of a lost city and you'd never know it. These temples and mountains. He claims to have found it several years ago, and they need to start digging around these massive complexes underneath the jungle. But yeah, it was a very enlightening experience, in part because we believed that our guide, who was this ex-Marine snake hunter, who said, if you guys find any gold, because there's the legends of the gold, if you guys find any gold, I'm going to make you swim across the river. And if you're suffering, I'm going to shoot you and take the gold. And we thought, wow, holy crap. We, all teenagers, had devised the plan, because he had the gun and we had knives. That was it. We had devised the plan to ambush him and kill him in case something like that was going to happen. As a 16-year-old, thinking you're going to kill someone it's a departure from the U.S. middle run-of-the-road, urban lifestyle.
Yeah. So you were 16, you're so impressionable. You go on an Indiana Jones type of adventure. All of a sudden, you are almost threatened for life. You're thinking about self-preservation. You didn't come back the same man you went, did you?
No, the easiest thing when I got back, we went to our favorite pizza joint and I got an extra large and ate the entire thing by myself. I think we all did. But I think the appreciation and the gratitude for the littlest of things, the drop of water, good water, because even though it rained everywhere, water wasn't that easily digestible. Food, we had beans and rice most of the time, and then we lost our mules in a flash flood, and we were eating pretty much anything, snakes and monkeys and whatever we can get our hands on. We would sit there and fantasize about eating and food. So really the littlest of comforts in life, shelter, food, security, the basics of Maslow's foundation is what we were really missing and what I grew to appreciate at an really appreciate at an early age.
Gratitude, love it. So much time is spent on just wanting more and going to the next thing and not appreciating the little things that we have. It's only until you're in a jungle and you're eating rice and beans, and now you can't even have that, and you got to hunt down monkeys, do you realize the value of that McDonald's 99-cent burger?
That's exactly right. Man, was it? And another oddity. So we're flying down on what Honduran airline called TAM, right? And the flight attendant, she was a short, little, not very attractive woman. And 60 days in the jungle with a bunch of teenage guys, we fly back. It's the same flight crew. She was gorgeous. She smelled good. Oh my God. It was like I could have married her. That's the kind of it's all relative. And then I think more than anything, it's the mindset. Your mind creates your life. And early on, when you realize that, I'll give you an idea, that there's the paradox between drowning and treading water. It's really not very different from movements and things, except when you're drowning, you're expending a lot of energy, both mentally and physically, and you're panicking. The world is coming to an end. You're going to die in your mind, right? Where you're treading water, you're spending less mental and physical energy, and you're essentially relaxed. But the movements are not that different, but you have to go through that exercise of learning how to tread water, if you will. And I think in large part, the exercise of learning how to control the mind. I'm not going to die. This is not the end. We're going to get through this. Mentally is the fortitude, the mental fortitude, I think, is important.
Absolutely. Can you give a specific example where this mental fortitude came into play in the real world for you? Something that happened where perhaps it could have gone differently if you hadn't gone on this adventure?
Yeah, I think, and let's be clear, it doesn't just happen. It's like the flick of a switch. It's like training, if you will. You don't just have this vision that I'm going to show up and work out 3 hours a day. That's just not going to happen. But you work into it. And the same thing mentally, you work into it. So this was a beginning of learning how to appreciate and be disciplined and structured with the mind. And there were many times where I would play games with myself. I was in Chile producing a game show. And when you park in Chile at the time, this was in the early 90s, there were people on the side of the street with these red rags, and they'd wave you in to tell you to park, and they'd pay the meter, and you'd pay them and tip them when you go out. So I would go into the meetings with a red rag coming out of the back pocket of my jeans. People would say, what's with the red rag? I said, listen, this is my plan. This is going to work out. And if it doesn't, this is plan B. This red rag is what's going to get me out of this. So I said, I have an out, but this is what the other side is. So mentally, I need to structure this and do this because I don't want to be on the street waving people down. But I think in large part, most of the time, especially in business and in life, having the mental fortitude or the mental discipline and the gratitude is so important, because if you don't, you're in a constant world of panic and fear, and you don't trust yourself. And I think that's really important. You will go through ups and downs. We all do. It's just being clear on what you want to do, where you want to go in that vision, I think.
What does that having that mental discipline look like? What are some tips, tactics, hacks, methods, processes that you have experimented with, tried and failed, that you can give them that can help them get started with this?
Sure. It's just like anything, and I equate that to training as a swimmer too, or in any type of physical activity. The hardest days are not the days that you feel good and you want to go in and you want to get the workout done. The hardest days are the days you just don't feel like going and you force yourself to do. So the mental discipline is much like that. It's not a matter of, I'm going to have to force myself. I'm just going to do minor changes. And if I don't feel it doing the things that I don't like to do mentally, physically, whatever it is, I'm just going to show up. I don't have to expect my greatest accomplishment that day. Show up. Continue to show up. And then the more you show up, these are seeds that you're planting, the more it becomes part of that life, part of that mental mindset, part of that vision. And once you continue to do that, it becomes part of you. Right? The discipline and the structure is hugely important, because I feel if you say, listen, I'm going to do something, and then you're like, I'm just going to sit on the couch and I'm going to have some chips. I don't really feel like doing it. You're never going to do it, right? Mentally, you have to say, I know it's hard. I know I'm just going to just show up. 15 minutes. Then maybe next week I go 20 minutes. And I think people, especially like after New Year, the resolutions, they come in and they say, listen, I'm going to quit this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to drop this many pounds. I'm going to spend this much time in the gym. And then what is it? Like 2 or 3 weeks later, they're back to their old selves, right? So the mental part is don't overdo it. Just understand that it takes baby steps.
Coming up with a process that is actually implementable, where we're being honest. You can't say December 31st, I'm going to go to the gym 3 hours a day every single day. That's just not realistic. But perhaps 3 days a week, 30 minutes a day. And then actually following through with that consistently every single time, whatever commitment, whatever the plan was. But let's talk about anxiety, because it's one thing to be able to come up with a system in your head, have the discipline and the knowing that I'm going to do this, and over time, the results will come on its own. Results are inevitable. But at some point where something is at stake, whether we are trying to start a business or change our body or get on a stage to do a bodybuilding show, anxiety comes in and you think, I have been doing the work. I've got an improvement. Am I good enough? Am I going to make it? I'm sure in your business, in your life, there were several times when that stress came in. How did you deal with that? Because this is now next level.
Let's be clear. Anxiety is always going to be there. It's just how you manage and deal with it. And you will always come up. I think as I get older and I realize all that fretting and worrying and anxiousness really didn't account to much except sleepless nights and anger and things of that nature. At the end of the day, I think the mental sort of mindset is, listen, your life or your thoughts become your life. It's as simple as that. Now, it's as simple to say as that. It's not easy to do. Because when you're in a situation, be it imposter syndrome or there's bills to be paid and there's no money or the employee embezzled, whatever happens, right? Man, it's horrible. It's really hard to say, listen, the world's coming to an end and I don't know what to do, as opposed to just taking a step back and say, okay, what's the worst that can happen? I got a roof, I got food, I got security, I got people who love me. If I lose all of the material stuff, what will happen? Will I die? No, probably not. Okay, so can I find other things to do? Probably. Yeah. Okay. So don't stress too much. There have been multiple times where I've been on the verge of bankruptcy and I thought, I got my house mortgaged to the tilt, the line of credit to pay the employees. I don't know what I'm going to do, except you want fries with that burger. That was my mindset. I just figured, okay, I'm in the US and what's the worst that can happen? I'm not going to be homeless. And at least I'll make do.
I love what you said. And this is something I also do with myself and my client, is that what is the worst that can happen? Creating that worst case scenario. Because I feel comfort in knowing when I know the absolute worst that can happen and I have a plan for it, nothing worse can happen past that. I feel mental peace knowing that if everything goes wrong, this is what's going to happen. And if this happened, this is what I'm going to do. So in between where I am now and that worst case situation, everything else is going to be better than what I'm already imagining. So that's perhaps a tool. Anything else? When you think about, you talked about looking back at your life and thinking all that fretting and worrying wasn't really useful. If you had to go back and perhaps take a moment in your life where you were really anxious and you had to redo that, what else would you do?
Yeah, I'll take a step back and say, at the end of the day, I think a lot of it too requires a little bit of balance. It's frustrating when you hear people, you really have to come in, you got to go all in. And you're like, okay, all in, what does that mean? I'm at the office 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I neglect my friends and family? Yeah, I think there's a balance there. One of the things when I was younger that helped me a lot, and I'll get back to that, but it was the saying, you are the average of the 5 friends you hang out with, right? If I would hang out with some successful people, then I'm more apt to be successful. And I would hang out with groups that were CEOs and business tycoons and stuff. My wife said to me, she goes, why do you get involved? Why are you a part of these groups? And I said, well, it's saying that you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with. She says, yeah. I said, that's why. So she says, man, are you bringing that average down? No, but one of the things that I would ask these people is, so I don't want to get to the point where I look back and I go, what should I have done differently? One of the things that I heard almost all the time is don't forget the family and watching your kid grow up, because it happens really fast, right? So I would make a point of doing 2 things. One, I would work out every day. I would walk in the mornings with the dogs. I would take my lunch hour whenever I could and go swim, right? And then I would come home by 6:30 to see my family. was pretty much it. And I'd try to dedicate spending time on the weekends. But the times where things got to the point where I thought, oh my God, I'm days away from coming to an end. I don't know that there was a way to say mentally, it's all going to be okay. Because at the time, I believed my world was coming to an end. And it was like, oh, I think it's just a have hope or figure, you know what, to your point, what's the worst that can happen? If I lose all of this, I still have my brains. I can go and get work somewhere else. The funny part, before I started the business, I was making good money. Stopped that, started the business. For the first 5 or 6 years, I was making considerably less because I didn't have the money to pay myself. So I had to sacrifice in the short term for the longer term vision. And I think that was helpful, but not everybody succeeds. And therein lies the rub. I gave up this 6-figure job at a big, nice company with all my benefits to go out on my own. And I didn't know really what I was doing. And I failed. Oh, man, why did I do that? I hear this all the time.
The uncertainty of the future.
Yeah.
And some people are so afraid of the uncertainty of the future that they can't take action in the present. Yeah. When really what it comes down to looking at what is at hand and trying to do the best that we can with what is at hand right now.
And there's also that saying, the biggest regrets you will have in life are not the things that you did do, it's the things that you didn't do. So if you say, I'm going to start a business, okay, it failed. You can't regret, oh man, I should have started a business. Now I'll never know. Boy, I regret that the rest of my life. Yeah, there are certain things you can hedge yourself starting a business, learning things. Listen, when I started my business, I had no idea what I was doing, the real business. I did other things on the side, but I went back to school and I got my MBA because I was very aware that I had no clue what I was doing. It's the whole imposter syndrome. So let me go back and learn some stuff to implement it into the business. And it helped a lot.
So many golden nuggets, and I want to go about it in a strategic manner because I don't want to forget it because there's so much here. Let's start with the daily exercise routine. You said that you always found time to walk the dogs. You always found to swim. Why? You already had so much going on. Why not just take the day off?
One, I think it was a habit more than anything. It cleared my mind. But more than anything, it's ironic because the days that I would have to do something or I couldn't swim, those were days where in the afternoon I felt slow and sluggish. And I was like, God, I got more energetic swimming, ironically, because there's nothing, I didn't have headphones or anything. There was nothing to listen to, nothing to look at like at the gym. So you have this discipline of Zen-like counting your breaths, feeling the stroke, feeling the water against the hair. So it was very much also thinking through issues at work, thinking through, okay, how can I do this? Or what do I need to do? Or, I forgot I should do this. So there were a lot of times that swimming helped calm my mind because I was out of the fire, if you will. And then walking the dogs, obviously out in nature and getting a little bit of mental exercise, physical and mental exercise before I go to work.
When it comes to balance, you talked about making sure that you are there for your family. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. A lot of friends I have, a lot of people I talk to, really talented, in my opinion, sometimes don't end up doing anything or pursuing what they should be pursuing or what they want to pursue because of the same reason/excuse. Yeah, I would do this, but I want to be a good dad. I would do this, but I want to be a good husband. What's the difference between your approach of the balance versus a person who's thinking that it's one or the other?
I think that the reality is I'm relatively, I would consider myself more hedonistic and opportunistic than I would, oh my God, I got to go out and make some money. You know what I mean? I never started the business thinking I got to make a huge amount of money. That was never the goal. I just wanted to have fun. Or I wanted to fulfill some passion of mine or even do a problem that I had. When I was in college, I had video games and laundromats only because I was addicted to Pac-Man and I wanted to play Pac-Man and other video games at laundromats with a pocket full of quarters. I didn't think it was a business. I just wanted it for myself. And it was a little business, but it was just because of my own wants. And when I was doing travel films, it's because I liked the filming thing and I liked traveling. So let's combine the two, right? It was never, I want to make a lot of money at it. So I think that there are people who early on, be it marketing or something, believe I've got to go out, I've got to get a job, I got to make 6 figures. And then they've got golden handcuffs. right? They've got a mortgage, they've got family, they've got car payments, insurance, they've got all the things that they go, I can't possibly go down. Because if I'm making 6 figures now and then I go down and I start my business and I spend my savings and then I pay myself less, I can't do it. Therein is a regret for the rest of your life. Now, whether you made it or you didn't make it, you still have that regret if you don't do it. And you'll always ask the question, was that the right decision? And did it really make me happy, these material things and all this money? Or would I have been happier with a little bit of passion and hedonistic pleasure?
Yeah, golden handcuffs. It's very well said. The man who doesn't have a lot to lose isn't afraid of much. The way you think is unconventional, right? Buying a laundromat so that you can play Pac-Man. And I'm sure going through life, there must have been highs and lows where you were proud of yourself for being an unconventional thinker, but perhaps also felt maybe left out because nobody else was like you around you. How did you deal with that?
I don't know if I'd say more unconventional as much as I didn't fear, because, when I was young, I would travel and I went to Honduras when I was 16. So doing the things, I didn't fear failing as much as I probably would have had I been more secure in not having, the gratitude of, oh my God, I could have died in the jungles. I had no food. What's the worst that can happen now, right? So I think that I would do it because there wasn't a lot of risk to me. I was like, what's the worst that can happen, as you say? And about the car thing, which is funny because when I was younger and I didn't have as much money, I would buy cars that I couldn't afford to impress people that I didn't know. And now that I can buy whatever I want, I just buy I have a Genesis, because who the hell am I trying to impress right now? And I'm really pretty happy that I can get around in a comfortable car with air conditioning and that gets me there. So it's also relative to who you're. Obviously, at your age, your mindset changes too, the value of what it is. And I think it's tough now for younger generation because marketing is so pervasive. You've got to drive this car, you've got to wear these clothes, you have to be like this guy or that woman, and the pressures are crazy.
I had a similar experience, not going to Honduras, fearing for life, but I came over to the country when I was very young, all by myself. I was homeless at one period of time, and I also developed the same type of mentality. That's why I feel such kinship towards you, that what's the worst that can happen? I've been homeless. I've slept in the bathroom of McDonald's. I used to have $1.07 in Pennsylvania at the time to eat one McChicken. Eat half of it in the morning, half of it in the evening. And now I'm not going to die. I'm going to lose some weight, which I put back on, as we all know, later on. But I'm going to be fine. Not everybody, I would say, has that opportunity, or in other way to say it would be, has gone through that. So if somebody's listening to it and says, yeah, life put you through the circumstances, life put you through that circumstances, and you learned a lot of those things, but I never went through that. Therefore, I'm afraid to start a business. Therefore, I'm afraid to pursue this thing. What is that person, what can they do today without having to go to Honduras to look for a city or become homeless on purpose? What are some things they can do?
That's a good question. So what would they do? I think one of the things you would do is get out of your comfort zone for a little bit, go places. I know if you can't afford to travel, but traveling is such an educator. If you go to other countries, Latin America, Asia, Africa especially, and you see the way people live and you see how happy they are, and that they don't need to be called by some weird pronoun, if you will, you're like, okay, I get it. There's a different mindset. They don't have the fear. Their big dream, because they've been told materialistic things are what makes you happy, go to the US, make money, right? So if you're in the US, I think take a step back and look at what you really have and say, okay, I've got a relatively comfortable life. Can I take it back a step, and would it be horrible? No. If I lived in a studio apartment and I was paying considerably less, appreciate a little bit of that, I think, or go to places where you volunteer or you help less fortunate people, and you then appreciate what you truly do have. I think that will be something that helps that mindset appreciate and get the gratitude, and also the structure to say, it ain't that bad. I can go out. I can do this. And that's the difference between a lot of people that really go out and do it and don't, is the mindset. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because now as you're saying it, I'm connecting the dots even in my own life, and having met some wonderful people like yourself and drawing some parallels. At the end of the day, it really comes down to meeting people and looking at things, right? And watching them and being an observer of life. Despite all the technology that we have today, I feel like mankind has never been more alone and isolated. We have everything at our fingertips and we know nothing about each other. Whereas what you're talking about, traveling the world if one has an opportunity, or even in your own city, going to areas that are more impoverished to get an understanding of how other people are living, really understand the blessings that we have, or talking to people who know more than you or live a different life than you, to get a perspective of where you are and what you could do. It all comes down to meeting people and being in that community, or finding a community you belong to. And that's perhaps what you also tried to say when you talked about surrounding yourself with certain people who you want to be like. It's really just finding that community of people that you could draw inspiration from and perhaps give a little bit as well.
You're absolutely right. And I think what you're saying is so true. It's not just that we've isolated ourselves. I think that social media, you don't need your friends. You get your Facebook friends and you do things and you post stuff and you get a bunch of likes and you're like, I'm loved. It's not the same. It's not the same as going out and meeting with a group of friends and having some fun, or a group of like-minded people. Now, there's a limit to how many people, because you have to have a few that are really tight that you can tell them some deep, go into the 5% of the feelings, as opposed to, hey, Mark, how you doing, man? How's the things? I know how's the bodybuilding going? Great, good. Hey, talk to you later. So I think that sometimes the hanging out with certain people are the inspiration. It's the inspiration, if you will. Like I said, the people you hang out with. If I hung out with people that were happy flipping burgers at Burger King and getting stoned on the afternoons, it's probably what I'd be doing now, right? But you have that different mindset when you see other people. And by the way, when you talk to the other people who have gone to this next level, they've done the same thing. They're just like us, right? They're no different. Maybe some of them were given additional opportunities, but I say to people all the time, listen, I could not be any luckier. I'm a white guy in the United States who was born in the 60s. How bad could I have been, right? But there's a lot of guys who just look at it and they're miserable because they think, yeah, but I've been dealt a bad hand. No, you haven't. You've been dealt an amazing hand. So I think that in large part, who you hang out, who you aspire to be and do because of the people you hang out with is hugely important.
Yeah. And you mentioned, we brought up social media and the distractions of social media and how it's hard to focus. Perhaps in your journey, there wasn't as much distraction through social media, but there were other distractions, right? What did you do to maintain that focus? What did you do to keep that eyes on the prize and maintain that balance that you want to maintain, but not let yourself get lost?
To be clear, Mark, I wasn't always singularly focused. Those tides had taken me out. I spent time doing drugs in my early 20s. So I went out there and I did those things. But I think when you hit the bottom and you're like, is this what I really want out of my life? That realization, the fact that I had history, discipline in swimming helps a lot. When I talk to people who have come from teams in swimming or any sort of athletics, they have an inherent discipline to them. And I think that is important. And if you don't, it's something that you should try. So the answer to the question is, I think when I look at it, I'm like, all right, I always believed that I was going to do something that I enjoyed. It wasn't about the money. It was just like, I really like to do certain things. Ironically, the thing that I recently did with my business, it was about the money because I didn't like running a business. It was a technology business and I couldn't write a line of code if you put a gun to my head. But it was an opportunity that fell into my lap. It didn't fall into my lap. I saw it. I'm like, wow, this could be big. I took advantage. I hired some people. We suffered for many years and ultimately made it through. But the mindset part, clearly the vision, what it is that you want. I'd like to say how to get there, but there's always room for pivoting. We're going to do this and this. And you go, oh, well, I'll have to change that up. I'm going to do it a little bit differently. But you're always trying to move forward. You're never saying, you know what? I take steps back. I get it. But that's not where it's going. Now we're going to have to just learn from that and go on.
How does one go about creating this vision? Because a lot of people, when you ask them, what do you want? I want to be rich. What do you want? I want to look hot. How do you change that generic understanding of an ultimate destination into what would be a true vision that one can embark upon through a specific journey?
I think there's a lot of simple things that you hear all the time, like a vision board. What exactly do you want? Is rich a very generic thing? And what is rich? Let's just use that as an example. I want to be rich. I want to be a millionaire. Then you make $1 million and you realize it's really not that much money. I want $10 million, right? Whatever it is. The truth is, what exactly is it that is going to satisfy your life? And write it down or cut pictures out in a magazine. And for the most part, it's people around you that you care for you. It's your health. What's the saying? The man who has all the money in the world wants and is sick. All the money in the world is not going to buy what he really wants, and that's his health. If you say, listen, the most important thing as I get older is to be healthy. Okay, I got it. When I get older, what do I do now? Right, I got to move a little bit. I got to eat right. I got to get some sleep, and I try not to stress so much. Okay, how do I do that? Write it down. And then secondly, what else is important for me besides health? Okay, is it family? Is it happiness? Is it material things? Because I can get to travel and I don't have to stress or get anxious about the bills. Okay, what is that? When I was building the business, my brother and I sat down and we said, how much money would we need to live the rest of our lives without ever having to worry or work if we made that? And we had that number down, right? At the time it was $6 million. And I doubled that because I know shit happens in taxes and everything else. So my number was $12 million. That's the number that I need. And then I can travel the world and I can comfortably pay the bills and do the things. And that was on my mirror for a decade, right? I didn't necessarily know how I was going to get there. But when a company came and said, we're interested, I said, yeah, I'm not there yet because I need to be at this revenue to get this multiple. And they said, yeah, what's your number? And I told them, and they told me to go away. A month later, they call me up, they bring in the CFO, they tell me all these numbers and they say, this is what we want to do. I said, yeah, well, let me be clear. I'm making good money. I have no debt. I don't have a board. I sleep well at night. Why would I do it unless I get my number? You will overpay today for something you will underpay for tomorrow. I believe that. And they looked at each other and they go, fine, you got a deal. And I'm like, wow, without an investment banker, I was done within 60 days. I was out. I was like, Yahoo. But that's because I put myself in the position. I was prepared. I was lucky. And I clearly knew what I wanted. And we had processed, documented everything. So that's like what you would want to do with your life, which is now, because after selling the business, when people say, oh, listen, I can't wait to finish and I want to retire and do nothing, or I want to play golf. Okay, yeah, that'll couple of months. Then what? Have some passion or purpose. Doesn't mean you have to make money. Do something that you like to do with some purpose, passion. And that's where I ended up, because I knew when I sold the business, I would continue on the next chapter of my life and something to do.
You mentioned the word lucky, and there are two schools of thoughts. There are some businessmen, some successful people who will say, I did all the right things, but there was luck. And if I hadn't gotten lucky, I wouldn't be where I am. And then there's another school of thought that says there is no such thing as luck. I created my own luck. Where do you fall and why?
Yeah, I have this conversation regularly. I coach small businesses and I tell them, listen, the only way opportunity is going to find you is if you're standing on the corner of lucky and prepared. Okay? You can be lucky and not prepared. You may not see opportunity. You might, but doubtful. You can be prepared and unlucky and you still might not see opportunity drive by. So be prepared and hope for good luck, because let's be clear, there are a lot of people out there that are more talented than me. There are a lot of actors that are more talented than the people on the screen, and singers and writers and all that, but their luck wasn't there. They may have been preparing, but they didn't get lucky. Or some of them got lucky and then they prepared later because they were terrible actors, whatever, right? This is part of life too. You can't sit there and say, I did it all on my own. No, I was at the right place at the right time. I met the right people with the right idea, whatever it is. That's a lot of lucky stuff. Like I said, I'm lucky I was born a white guy in the United States in the 60s. How bad could I screw that up?
You seem like a very joyful person. And I want to talk about joy. In a world where there's so much negativity, how do you maintain that joy?
Try not to surround yourself with negative Nellies. It's that same adage. If you say, listen, it's tough, really. And my wife is really good at this, because I like to see what's going on with the politics and I turn on the news. She will not sit in the room with me and watch the news. It's just negative stuff for her. And so going out and watching dramas, it's if you think things, they may come into your life. Like I won't watch medical dramas because I'm thinking, I don't want to know what's going on with these diseases because maybe I'm a hypochondriac, but I'm going to get that disease. Oh shit. And it's the same philosophy, I think, is I wouldn't be hanging out with people that are always miserable and complaining and upset, because that's not who I am. That's not how I think life should be lived, right?
Living a purposeful life, having a vision, focusing on it, maintaining a balance with the things that you truly care about, and cutting out the nonsense that you really don't need.
At the end of the day, and there's a couple of things I do too. Every morning before I get up, I lay in bed, I count my blessings, if you will. I'm grateful for everything from my toes to the hair on my head, and I go all the way up my body. The internal organs, the skin, the blood, everything. And I have a gratitude journal that I write every day, what I'm grateful for. And it can be really pedantic things. I'm grateful for the grass that's growing out there because it's giving life to the oxygen and blah, blah, blah. Let's take advantage and make the best of what we got here as a way. We're going to be sitting there miserably worrying about the things that we can't change.
Now you are making a television series. Tell us about this television series. What is it about?
Yeah, so I have my dog here do you want to hear more about this? So yeah, sorry. I'll take you back a couple of years. 40 years ago, I moved to Los Angeles and I thought, you know what? I want to produce and direct movies. That never happened, right? But what happened was my sister was helping my father move. My father is a writer. He wrote a tribute to a friend, a love story, which is uncharacteristic because he wrote nonfiction stuff and travel books. And so she says, can I read this? And he says, yeah. So she falls in love with it. She goes, my God, Daddy wrote a love story. She sends it to me. I read it. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I call my dad. I said, Dad, can I buy the rights to this? Sure, he says. I said, I don't have any money. I'll buy it for $1. He says, sure. I said, can I borrow $1? So make a long story short, I thought to myself, wow, I read this book my dad wrote and how nepotistic, I think it's good. A friend of mine was producing a movie and I said, Doug, can you read this and just tell me what you think? He goes, I'm in the middle of a movie right now. Just give me a little time. I said, take your time. 3 days later, he calls me up. He says, we are meant to do this. This is amazing. I love this. So, of course, he ended up not falling out with the distributors of his film. I ended up going to Chile to do game shows. Then I did my tech company, and I said, one of these days, Doug, we're going to do this. A couple of weeks ago, I published the book. It's called The Reincarnation of Marie. The concept about a guy this is a historical fiction and a paranormal romance. The guy falls in love with a woman from reading her journal that was written 100 years earlier. And then he realizes, oh man, I lost my mind. I've fallen in love with a dead woman. Then he finds her reincarnation. And this is the basis of the story. So the concept for the TV series is that we modernize it a little bit more, but he reads this thing and then we delve into the lives of the previous era. Marie Bashkirtseff was the woman who wrote the journal, and then people in her life and how they are intertwined with the current lifetime. So when you look at it, your lives and you say, so who was Mark in a previous life? Did I know Mark? Is there some karma I need to pay back or that I'm getting rewarded for? Or are there sins of the father? All of these things are there for a reason because people go, we inherit things, or is there soulmates? And are there added things that we have to pay for? We don't know. But the TV series explores that. The soulmates, love, hate, two sides of the same coin. How were you related in previous lives? Did you not get together? Do you have karma to pay back and things like that? So the book, it's called The Reincarnation of Marie. And then I put a website together that says it's mariethestory.com that has information on the book and where to buy it. And then what we're doing with the TV series. My dad was a travel writer and a happy-go-lucky, slutty kind of guy, right? So that's who he was. And to write this, one of two things had to have happened. And that is, he either wrote it because he's the guy who fell in love with Marie from reading her journal, and he wrote it as like this friend of mine, quote unquote, right? Or he actually did have a friend who came to him and said a story like that. And then he did a deeper dive, read her journal because she's got a fascinating journal. It was a bestseller in the 1800s. This was a woman who wrote a journal for 10 years. She died at 24, very young. And she wrote about things that at the time women didn't talk about. So he picked up the book in a bookseller in Paris in the Seine. And I don't know if he read it or his friend read it, but he wrote this passionate little story about.
Wow. It sounds amazing. It's cool. A very interesting concept. Making this into a TV series, I know you said you and your friend wanted to do it a while ago. It didn't really happen. You're doing it now. Are you doing it now just because you wanted to finish this project, or is there another meaning to this? Yeah,
obviously the meaning, the connection with my father, that's the one meaning. And secondly, there are a lot of people, and I'm talking to producers now, and they're like, wow, you did it right, man. You went out and built a company and made money, and now you don't have to stress, because I guess a lot of them stress, right? They're passionate about it. But the reality is I'm going full circle because I always, one, had a passion for the creative part of producing and doing television or film, right? And two, because I have a passion for it and because of my father and because I wanted to do it when I was in college, I thought, okay, now's the time. And I sold my company. I have the time, I have the interest, and even more importantly, I think it's all about timing as well, because back then when I was looking to do this, it was the early 80s. There were not a lot of avenues, right? There were a couple of television stations and a few movie theaters. Now, look at all the content that's out there. And somebody who says, look, I'm really into this paranormal, this sort of spooky time travel reincarnation thing. I love it. There's an audience for that. Doesn't have to be a huge amount of it. Is a very generic bestseller. So streamers have also given opportunity to allow people to make things that are more in line with another niche interest.
Absolutely. It sounds wonderful. I can't wait for the TV series to come out. I'm so lucky to have found you because there's just so much to learn from you, not just about business, but also about going about life. And I'm sure the audience will resonate with it too. It's just a way of living that is more free, fruitful, joyful, but productive. And in a world where we're surrounded by negativity and stress and anxiety, you are nothing but a breath of fresh air. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I can't wait to hear more.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.